Commander Vextar's hands trembled as he processed Admiral Chen's ultimatum. Surrender had never been a concept in Valdaran military doctrine, because surrender had never been necessary. For 8 centuries, the Empire's fleets had been the instruments of other species' doom, not the victims of superior firepower. "Sir," his communications officer called out urgently, "incoming priority transmission from Imperial Command. Emperor Zarkus himself is requesting immediate status report." Vextar closed his eyes, knowing that admitting failure to the Emperor would mean execution, even if he somehow survived this encounter. But lying about the situation would doom any rescue fleet sent to aid him. "Put him through," he ordered reluctantly. Emperor Zarkus appeared on the main screen, his expression radiating the absolute confidence of a ruler who had never known defeat. "Commander Vextar, our long-range sensors detected weapons fire in the human system. Report your conquest progress immediately." "Your Majesty," Vextar began carefully, "the situation has developed complications. The humans possess military capabilities far beyond our initial intelligence estimates." The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Explain these complications, Commander." Vextar transmitted the tactical data showing humanity's hidden fleet. He watched as Emperor Zarkus's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to dawning horror as the scope of human military preparation became clear. 8,000 ships? The Emperor whispered. "How is this possible? Our scouts reported a single system species with minimal defenses. They were hiding, Your Majesty, using stealth technology that completely fooled our sensors. We've already lost 3 vessels to weapons systems unlike anything in our database. The humans are demanding our surrender." Emperor Zarkus's face contorted with rage. "Surrender? The Valdaran Empire does not surrender to primitive species. You will engage and destroy their fleet, Commander. That is an Imperial command. Your Majesty, with respect, their technology appears superior to ours. They destroyed our ships without taking any damage in return. Continuing this engagement may result in victory." The Emperor roared. "You have 60 of our finest warships, Commander. Use them to crush these humans and restore the Empire's honor. Failure is not acceptable." The transmission ended, leaving Vextar staring at a blank screen. The Emperor's response was exactly what he had expected. Valdaran pride would not allow them to acknowledge any species as their superior. He would have to find a way to win an unwinnable battle or die trying. "Sir," his tactical officer spoke quietly, "perhaps we could retreat beyond the system's edge and call for reinforcements. A larger fleet might—" "The Emperor has given his orders," Vextar interrupted. "Besides, look at their formation. They've positioned ships to cut off every escape route. These humans didn't stumble into this confrontation. They planned it down to the smallest detail." Admiral Chen monitored the Valdaran communications from her command center, humanity's translation systems having long ago cracked Imperial encryption codes. The conversation between Vextar and his Emperor revealed everything she needed to know about their enemy's psychology. "They're going to try something desperate," General Torres observed. "Valdaran military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force when faced with unexpected resistance." "Let them," Chen replied calmly. "Every tactic they attempt will provide valuable data for future encounters with Imperial forces. Besides, their desperation will work in our favor." Commander Vextar studied his remaining ships, searching for any tactical advantage that might level the playing field. The humans had superior numbers and technology, but perhaps Valdaran experience and aggression could overcome those advantages. "All ships, implement Doctrine 7, he ordered. "Concentrated bombardment on a single target. If we can destroy one of their vessels, it might demonstrate that they're not invincible." The 57 remaining Valdaran warships formed into attack formation, every weapon system locked onto a single human destroyer that had moved slightly ahead of the main fleet. It was humanity's apparent weakest vessel, isolated and seemingly vulnerable. "Fire everything," Vextar commanded. The combined firepower of the Valdaran fleet struck the human destroyer simultaneously. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and plasma charges converged on the target in a brilliant display of destructive force. The explosion lit up local space like a miniature star, energy readings spiking beyond normal sensor parameters. When the light faded, the human destroyer floated completely undamaged in the same position. Its shields hadn't even flickered. "Impossible," Vextar muttered. "That bombardment should have destroyed a small asteroid." "Sir," the sensor operator reported, The human vessel's defensive systems dispersed our entire attack. Energy absorption efficiency approaches theoretical maximums. They're not just blocking our weapons. They're converting the energy to strengthen their own systems. The human destroyer began to glow with absorbed energy, its hull radiating power that had been stolen from Valdaran weapons. Then it fired a single return shot, a beam of concentrated energy that struck the battleship Eternal Conquest dead center. The Valdaran flagship's shields collapsed instantly, overwhelmed by their own redirected firepower. The beam continued through the ship's hull, creating a perfectly round hole that extended from bow to stern. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as critical systems failed, and within minutes, the Eternal Conquest was drifting dead in space. They turned our own weapons against us, Vextar realized with growing horror. Their defensive systems don't just block attacks, they weaponize them. Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile as she watched the Valdaran fleet's growing panic. Humanity's energy absorption shields were one of their most innovative achievements. Technology developed specifically to counter the Empire's reliance on overwhelming firepower. Admiral, Commander Liu Wei reported, the Valdaran fleet is attempting to withdraw beyond weapons range. Let them try, Chen replied. Deploy the pursuit squadrons. As the Valdaran ships attempted to retreat, human vessels that had been hiding in their retreat path revealed themselves. Fast attack craft emerged from asteroid fields and planetary rings, their quantum drives allowing them to match any escape velocity the Imperial fleet could achieve. We're trapped, Vextar's navigation officer reported. Human vessels are moving to intercept on all possible retreat vectors. They've been positioned to counter every tactical option in our doctrine. Vextar realized the terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just prepared superior weapons and ships. They had studied Valdaran tactics so thoroughly that every move his fleet made had been anticipated and countered before the battle even began. Sir, his communications officer called out, incoming transmission from the human admiral. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the screen again, her expression showing neither anger nor triumph, just cold professional assessment. Commander Vextar, you've now seen that retreat is impossible, and resistance is futile. Your Emperor ordered you to engage our fleet, and you have done so. Honor has been satisfied. Now choose surrender and live or continue fighting and die. Admiral, Vextar said carefully, perhaps we could negotiate. The Empire might be willing to establish peaceful relations with humanity. Mutual non-aggression treaties that the time for negotiation passed when your fleet entered our space with hostile intent, Chen interrupted. Your empire has spent 8 centuries conquering and enslaving other species. That reign of terror ends now. You have 30 seconds to decide, surrender or destruction. Vextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were Valdaran warriors, trained from birth to fight and die for the Empire, but they were also intelligent beings who could recognize impossible odds when they saw them. Sir, his tactical officer spoke quietly, our duty is to the Empire's future, not its past. If we die here, no one will know the truth about human capabilities. The Empire will send more fleets to their destruction. The countdown timer on Chen's transmission showed 15 seconds remaining. Vextar realized that surrender might be the only way to warn his people about the predator they had awakened. Stand down all weapons, he ordered reluctantly. Prepare for surrender protocols. The admission tasted like poison, but it was better than extinction. Fleet Commander Vextar's mind raced as he processed the impossible situation. 8,000 human vessels surrounded his fleet, their weapons trained on his 60 ships with lethal precision. Every tactical doctrine he had ever learned screamed that retreat was the only rational option. Yet retreat meant admitting that the mighty Valdaran Empire had been outmaneuvered by a supposedly primitive species. Commander, his tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge's tense silence. Their weapon signatures are unlike anything in our database. Energy output readings suggest destructive capability, far exceeding our defensive systems. Vextar stared at the human fleet arrangement on his display. Their formation was flawless, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no escape routes. These weren't the panicked, desperate tactics of a cornered civilization. This was the precise work of military strategists who had planned every detail. Perhaps they're bluffing, he muttered, grasping for any explanation that didn't involve acknowledging humanity's superiority. Visual intimidation is an effective psychological tactic. Their weapons may not be as powerful as their energy signatures suggest. His sensor operator looked up from his console, expression grim. "Commander, I'm detecting quantum resonance patterns in their torpedo systems. The theoretical destructive output would be," he paused, double-checking his readings, "sufficient to destroy our largest dreadnoughts with single hits." Admiral Chen observed the Valdaran fleet from her command center, noting their hesitation. 40 years of studying enemy psychology had taught humanity exactly how Valdaran commanders would react when faced with unexpected opposition. They would test human resolve, assuming that superior numbers and intimidation would eventually prevail. "Admiral," General Torres reported, "the Valdaran fleet is powering weapons. They appear to be preparing for engagement despite the odds." Chen nodded. She had expected this. Valdaran arrogance was legendary throughout the galaxy. They had never retreated from battle because they had never needed to. Their confidence was about to become their greatest weakness. "Signal the demonstration fleet," she ordered. "Commence Phase 1. 3 human vessels detached from the massive formation, approaching the Valdaran fleet with deliberate slowness. These ships were smaller than the Empire's battleships, their hulls gleaming with an unusual metallic finish that seemed to absorb sensor readings rather than reflect them. Commander Vextar watched their approach with growing confusion. "3 ships? Are they attempting to negotiate?" "Negative, sir," his communications officer replied. "No transmissions detected. They're maintaining attack formation." 3 ships against 60, Vextar laughed, some of his confidence returning. "Even if their technology is advanced, the mathematics are clear. All weapons target the approaching vessels. Show them the price of challenging the Empire." The Valdaran fleet opened fire with devastating coordination. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and kinetic weapons unleashed their fury against the 3 human ships. The combined firepower was sufficient to reduce a small moon to cosmic dust, creating a brilliant light show that illuminated the darkness of space. When the energy dissipated, the 3 human vessels remained completely undamaged. "Impossible," Vextar roared. "Our weapons struck their hulls directly." His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. "Commander, their defensive systems absorbed our entire barrage without any visible strain. Energy dispersal patterns indicate their shields are operating on principles we don't understand." The 3 human ships continued their approach, seemingly unaffected by the massive attack. As they drew closer, their weapon systems began charging with energy signatures that made Valdaran sensors scream warnings. "Evasive maneuvers," Vextar commanded. "All ships scatter formation." But it was too late. The lead human vessel fired a single quantum torpedo, its trajectory perfectly calculated to intercept the Valdaran battleship Thunder of Conquest. The weapon struck the ship's primary shields, and for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the battleship's entire defensive grid collapsed in a cascade of energy overloads. The Thunder of Conquest, a vessel that had participated in dozens of successful conquests, simply ceased to exist. The quantum torpedo had disrupted the fundamental atomic bonds holding the ship together, reducing 800 meters of advanced military engineering to an expanding cloud of particles. "By the void," Vextar whispered, watching the destruction of one of his most powerful ships. "That's impossible. No weapon should be able to penetrate our shields so completely." The second human ship demonstrated humanity's plasma cannon technology. A brilliant beam of adaptive energy struck the cruiser Crimson Talon. But instead of the expected explosion, the weapon seemed to learn and adapt in real time. The Valdaran ship's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before the plasma found their resonance frequency and burned through them like they didn't exist. The Crimson Talon's hull began to glow red-hot as the adaptive plasma systematically dismantled its molecular structure. Within minutes, the cruiser was reduced to molten slag, its crew never having time to comprehend what had killed them. "Commander," the sensor operator called out in panic. "The 3rd human vessel is charging weapons. Energy levels are off our measurement scale." Vextar looked at his remaining 58 ships, then at the thousands of human vessels waiting patiently in the distance. The demonstration was clear. Humanity possessed technology that rendered Valdaran military superiority meaningless. Each human ship was individually capable of destroying multiple Valdaran vessels without sustaining damage. The 3rd human ship fired what appeared to be a relatively small projectile at the destroyer Swift Death. The weapon moved, slowly enough that Valdoran's sensors could track its approach, but somehow their point defense systems couldn't target it. The projectile passed through the destroyer's shields as if they weren't there, penetrating the hull near the engine section. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then the swift death began to implode, its hull collapsing inward as if reality itself was being compressed into a single point. The entire ship disappeared into a microscopic singularity that existed for just long enough to consume every atom of the vessel before winking out of existence. Singularity weapons, Vextar breathed. They have weapons that can create artificial black holes. Admiral Chen watched the Valdoran fleet's reaction with cold satisfaction. The demonstration had achieved its purpose. The enemy now understood that humanity's technological advantage was absolute. Their ships could not penetrate human defenses, could not evade human weapons, and could not survive human firepower. "Admiral," Commander Liu Wei reported, "the Valdoran fleet has stopped their advance. Their formations are breaking apart, and we're detecting emergency communications between their ships." "Perfect," Chen replied. "Open a channel to their command vessel." Her image appeared on every Valdaran ship simultaneously, a projection of calm authority that contrasted sharply with the chaos now gripping the enemy fleet. "Commander Vextar of the Valdaran Empire, you have just witnessed a small sample of human military capability. Your 3 ships were destroyed by vessels representing our oldest and most basic weapon systems." The bridge of the Dominion fell silent as her words sank in. The weapons that had effortlessly annihilated 3 Valdaran warships were considered primitive by human standards. "You invaded our space believing us to be weak and defenseless," Chen continued. "Your empire has built its power on the conquest of unprepared civilizations. Today you face a species that has been preparing for your arrival for 40 years. We know your tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses." Vextar stared at the human admiral, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. The Valdaran Empire hadn't discovered a new world to conquer. They had stumbled into the territory of predators whose patience had finally reached its end. "You have one opportunity to surrender," Chen announced. "Lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Refuse, and you will discover what our advanced weapon systems can accomplish." The choice was clear: surrender to an enemy they couldn't fight, or die in a battle they couldn't win. Fleet Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of the battleship Dominion, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 60 Valdaran warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the crimson and gold of the Empire. The sight should have struck terror into any defending force, yet the human system appeared almost peacefully unaware of their arrival. "Sensor report," Vextar commanded, his forearms folded behind his back in the traditional pose of Valdaran authority. "Confirming initial intelligence." "Commander," his sensor operator replied. "One inhabited world, 3rd planet from the star. Minimal orbital defenses detected. We're reading approximately 30 ships of unknown configuration near the planet, but their energy signatures suggest primitive defensive capabilities." Vextar nodded with satisfaction. 30 ships against 60 was hardly a fair fight, but the Empire had not built its reputation on fairness. Communications broadcast the standard surrender demand on all frequencies. Give them one opportunity to submit before we demonstrate our superior firepower. The communications officer activated the transmission array, sending the Empire's ultimatum toward Earth in a dozen different languages and communication protocols. The message was simple and had been used thousands of times before: surrender immediately or face total annihilation. On Earth, Admiral Chen received the transmission in the Luna Command Center. She read the demands with cold fury, noting the casual tone that suggested humanity was just another primitive species to be crushed underfoot. The Valdarans offered slavery in exchange for submission, as if this was somehow generous. "Send the response we prepared," Chen ordered. "Make them believe we're a desperate, outmatched civilization trying to buy time." Earth's reply was transmitted back to the Valdaran fleet, a message filled with apparent confusion and fear. The humans claimed they needed time to consult their government, begging for mercy while insisting they were a peaceful species with no military ambitions. It was exactly the kind of response the Valdarans expected from every conquered world. "Pathetic," Commander Vextar muttered, reading the human transmission. "They're stalling for time as if that will somehow save them. Signal the fleet to assume attack formation." We'll give them a demonstration of Valdaran power. The 60 ships began moving into their traditional intimidation pattern, a formation designed to maximize the visual impact of their overwhelming force. They approached slowly, allowing their enemies time to fully grasp the hopelessness of their situation. It was psychological warfare at its most basic. Break the enemy's will before the first shot was fired. As the Valdaran fleet drew closer to Earth, their sensors began detecting additional details about human civilization. Orbital stations, communication satellites, and what appeared to be mining operations throughout the asteroid belt. Everything confirmed their initial assessment, a single system species with limited military capabilities. "Commander," the sensor operator called out, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty. "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the outer planets. Energy signatures that don't match our database." Vextar glanced at the sensor display dismissively. "Probably industrial facilities or research stations. Single-system species often develop unusual technologies when confined to their home system. Nothing that could threaten our fleet." But the sensor operator's frown deepened as he studied his readings more carefully. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Valdaran records, and they seemed to be moving. "Commander, recommend we conduct a more detailed sensor sweep." "These readings are irrelevant," Vextar interrupted. "Focus on the primary target. We're here to conquer Earth, not catalog their primitive technology." The Valdaran fleet continued its approach, now close enough for visual confirmation of Earth's defenses. The 30 human ships appeared to be hastily assembled, their formations loose and unprofessional. Several vessels showed signs of civilian conversion. Exactly what the Valdarans expected from a species forced into desperate defensive measures. "Transmission from the human fleet," the communications officer reported. "They're requesting negotiations." "Denied," Vextar replied immediately. "Target their lead vessels. Prepare to demonstrate the futility of resistance." The Valdaran fleet's weapon systems came online, energy conduits glowing with deadly power. Particle beams and plasma cannons locked onto the human ships, ready to deliver devastating firepower that had shattered the defenses of countless worlds. That was when everything changed. "Commander," the sensor operator's voice cracked with alarm. "Multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. Massive energy signatures decloaking all around us." The main display erupted with new information as humanity's hidden fleet revealed itself. Ships materialized from seemingly empty space, their advanced stealth systems dropping away to expose the true scope of human military preparation. What had appeared to be 30 defending vessels was actually the visible tip of an enormous fleet. "Impossible," Vextar breathed, watching as thousands of new contacts appeared on his sensors. Ships emerged from asteroid fields, planetary rings, and the outer system's void. Each one radiated energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the Valdaran arsenal. "Commander, we're detecting over 8,000 hostile vessels," the sensor operator reported, his voice rising in panic. "They've been hiding throughout the entire system." The bridge of the Dominion fell silent except for the humming of overloaded sensors trying to process the overwhelming data. Vextar stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The humans hadn't just prepared a defense. They had constructed the largest fleet in recorded galactic history. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Intelligence reported a single system species with minimal space capabilities." "Commander," his tactical officer interrupted, "the human ships are moving into attack formation. Their weapon signatures are unprecedented. I've never seen energy readings like these." Admiral Chen watched from Luna Command as her fleet revealed itself to the shocked Valdaran force. 40 years of preparation had led to this moment, and the expressions of terror on the enemy ship's communication channels told her everything she needed to know about their psychological state. "Signal all fleet commanders," she ordered. "Commence Operation Prometheus. Show them what humanity is truly capable of." The hidden fleet moved with precision that spoke to decades of training and preparation. Ships that had waited in silent patience now revealed weapon systems beyond Valdaran comprehension. Quantum torpedoes charged with devastating power, adaptive plasma cannons calibrated specifically for Valdaran shield frequencies, and defensive systems that made their vessels nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. "Commander," Vextar realized with growing horror that his 60 ships hadn't stumbled into a conquest. They had walked into a carefully prepared trap. The humans had been watching them, studying them, preparing for this exact moment. "Sir," his communications officer called out, voice trembling. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the Valdaran bridge, calm and implacable. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You have entered our space with hostile intent and threatened our civilization. Your empire's expansion ends here. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences of your aggression." Vexitar looked at his fleet, outnumbered more than 100 to 1 by vessels that appeared technologically superior to anything the Empire possessed. For the first time in 8 centuries of conquest, a Valdaran commander faced the terrifying reality of absolute defeat. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was about to demonstrate why they had remained hidden for so long. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in chambers carved from solid rock and shielded by layers of electromagnetic dampening fields, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a holographic representation of the solar system. The 3-dimensional display showed not just the familiar planets and moons, but thousands of additional objects that no external observer would ever detect. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's greatest secret. "All hidden fleet assets are at full readiness," reported General Marcus Torres, head of the Terran Defense Initiative. "Project Prometheus has exceeded all expectations. We now have over 8,000 combat vessels stationed throughout the system, fully cloaked and operational." Admiral Chen nodded, studying the display. Each dot of light represented years of clandestine construction, hidden research, and careful preparation. While the galaxy saw humanity as a peaceful, single-system species content with their small corner of space, the truth was far different. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since first achieving faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. "What about the early warning networks?" Chen asked. "Scout drones have been tracking the approaching Valdaran fleet for 6 days, Torres replied. 60 warships, standard Empire configuration. They're maintaining stealth protocols, but our quantum detection arrays picked them up the moment they entered the outer system." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist of Project Prometheus, stepped forward. "Admiral, our analysis of captured Valdaran technology indicates their ships rely heavily on conventional energy shields and kinetic weapons. They've clearly never encountered our adaptive plasma weaponry or quantum torpedoes." Chen smiled grimly. The Valdaran Empire's greatest weakness was their arrogance. For 8 centuries, they had conquered primitive civilizations using the same tactics and technology. They had grown complacent, assuming that superior numbers and conventional firepower would always triumph. They had never faced an enemy that had studied them for decades. "Dr. Vasquez, remind me of Project Prometheus's original objectives." "To develop military technology capable of defeating any threat to human civilization, with emphasis on force multiplication and tactical adaptability. We began with the assumption that any hostile alien force would outnumber us significantly." Vasquez paused, accessing her datapad. "The project succeeded beyond our initial parameters. Our ships are individually superior to anything in the Valdaran arsenal. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for galactic contact since their first tentative steps into interstellar space. Early unmanned probes had discovered the remnants of conquered civilizations, entire worlds reduced to mining operations and slave colonies. The evidence painted a clear picture of the galaxy's dominant power and its methods. Rather than flee or hide, humanity had chosen a different path. They had studied their potential enemies from the shadows, learning everything about Valdaran technology, tactics, and psychology. Every piece of wreckage, every abandoned outpost, every surviving witness had contributed to humanity's understanding of their future opponents. "The Valdarans believe they're hunting sheep," General Torres observed. "They have no idea they're about to encounter wolves." Admiral Chen turned to Commander Liu Wei, head of the Hidden Fleet's Tactical Division. "Are our surprise deployments ready?" "All assets are in position, Admiral. The Valdarans will drop out of FTL at the system's edge, expecting to find a lightly defended world. Instead, they'll find themselves surrounded by the largest military force ever assembled by humanity." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity would allow the Valdaran fleet to approach Earth, letting them believe their intelligence was accurate. The invaders would see what appeared to be a small defensive fleet and minimal orbital installations. They would demand surrender, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Then humanity would reveal the truth. What about the diplomatic protocols? Chen asked. Torres consulted his files. We've prepared surrender demands that match standard Valdaran procedures. The enemy fleet will expect immediate capitulation when they demonstrate their firepower. We'll let them believe they've succeeded, at least initially, Dr. Vasquez added. Our psychological profile suggests the Valdarans will want to make an example of Earth. They'll likely demand a demonstration of their weapons against our orbital facilities before accepting surrender. This will give us the perfect opportunity to reveal our true capabilities. The Hidden Fleet represented humanity's greatest achievement and its most closely guarded secret. Using advanced stealth technology developed from studying Valdaran sensor systems, thousands of warships had been constructed in hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. Each vessel incorporated the most advanced human technology, designed specifically to counter known Valdaran capabilities. Admiral, Commander Liu Wei spoke up. There's something else. Our long-range sensors indicate this isn't just a scouting force. The composition of their fleet suggests they intend to occupy the system permanently. They're bringing colonization equipment and administrative personnel. Chen's expression hardened. The Valdarans weren't just planning to conquer Earth. They intended to strip mine the entire solar system and enslave any surviving humans. This wasn't war. It was genocide dressed up as expansion. Then we'll make sure this is their final expansion, she said quietly. The command center fell silent as the weight of the moment settled on everyone present. For 40 years, humanity had prepared for this confrontation. Generations of scientists, engineers, and military personnel had dedicated their lives to ensuring human survival against an empire that had never known defeat. Time until the Valdaran fleet reaches Earth? Chen asked. 14 hours, 37 minutes, Torres replied. Signal all Hidden Fleet commanders. Operation Prometheus is now active. In 15 hours, the galaxy will learn that humanity is not prey. Admiral Chen paused, looking around the room at the faces of her officers. We're not just defending Earth. We're ending the Valdaran Empire's reign of terror forever. As the final preparations began, humanity's hidden fleet stirred to life throughout the solar system. Ships emerged from asteroid bases, planetary rings, and deep space stations where they had waited in absolute silence. Each vessel represented the culmination of human ingenuity and determination, built for one purpose: to shatter the myth of Valdaran invincibility. The Empire had chosen the wrong species to threaten. Soon they would discover that humanity's apparent weakness had been the galaxy's greatest deception. The crimson banners of the Valdaran Empire stretched across 17 star systems, each one marked with the golden talon that had become the symbol of absolute dominion over 300 billion souls. For 8 centuries, the Empire had expanded without pause, consuming civilizations like a cosmic wildfire that left only ashes and subjugation in its wake. The Valdaran Military Council believed themselves invincible, and why wouldn't they? No species had ever mounted a successful resistance against their war machine. Emperor Xarchus III stood before the massive holographic display in his throne room, watching as his latest conquest unfolded. The crystalline beings of Nexara 7 were putting up their final, desperate fight, their energy weapons barely scratching the hulls of Valdaran dreadnoughts. Soon their world would join the Empire's collection, its population either enslaved or exterminated depending on their usefulness. Your Majesty, Admiral Korath's voice cut through the throne room's silence. The grizzled veteran's multiple eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he approached the throne. Nexara 7 will fall within the rotation. Their defensive grid has collapsed and our ground forces have secured the primary cities. Emperor Xarchus nodded, his attention already shifting to the tactical display, showing the Empire's expanding borders. Good, what of the Outer Rim territories? Any new species worth our attention? Several promising worlds, Your Majesty. Our scouts have identified at least 12 civilizations ripe for conquest. Most are in the primitive stages of space travel, barely capable of defending their own systems. Korath paused, consulting his datapad. However, there is one anomaly that our intelligence division flagged. The Emperor's interest sharpened. Anomalies were rare in their well-ordered expansion campaigns. Explain. A species calling themselves humans from a system they call Sol, third planet from their star. They've recently achieved faster-than-light travel, but here's the strange part. They've made no attempt at expansion beyond their immediate stellar neighborhood. Our long-range scouts detected them 40 rotations ago, yet they remain confined to their single system. Emperor Zarkus leaned back in his throne, considering this information. In his experience, any species capable of FTL travel immediately began expanding their territory. It was the natural order of things: grow or be consumed. Perhaps they lack the resources or the will for expansion.
Send a subjugation fleet.
Standard protocol. Already prepared, Your Majesty. Fleet Commander Vextar will lead 3 battle groups, 60 warships total. More than sufficient for a single system species. Korath's mandibles clicked with amusement. The humans will likely surrender at the first sight of our forces. The Emperor dismissed the matter from his thoughts. 60 ships were overwhelming force for any single system civilization. Within a few cycles, humanity would be another footnote in the Empire's long history of conquest. His attention returned to more pressing matters: the consolidation of newly acquired territories and the planning of subsequent expansion campaigns. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Valdaran scout ship Nexus drifted silently through the outer edges of the Sol system. Captain Morden studied the readings from his sensors, his expression growing increasingly puzzled. The human homeworld appeared heavily populated, with orbital installations and a modest defensive fleet. Nothing particularly impressive by Valdaran standards, yet something felt wrong. "Captain," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the 4th planet, the one they call Mars." Morden moved to examine the readings himself. Mars showed signs of recent terraforming and heavy industrial activity. Massive structures dotted its surface, but their purpose remained unclear. "Are those shipyards?" "Negative, sir. The energy patterns don't match any shipbuilding facilities in our database. The signatures are strange, almost like they're deliberately masked." The captain frowned. Masking technology suggested these humans were more advanced than initial reports indicated. Still, even advanced single-system species posed little threat to the Empire's might. "Continue monitoring. Flag any unusual activity for the Intelligence Division." Back on Nexara 7, the final pockets of resistance crumbled under the weight of Valdaran assault troops. The crystalline beings' last stronghold fell as their energy barriers failed, overwhelmed by sustained bombardment. Emperor Zarkus watched the feeds with satisfaction as his forces planted the Imperial banner among the ruins. "Another glorious victory for the Empire," Admiral Korath announced. "Nexara 7's resources will fuel our next wave of expansion. The mining operations can begin immediately." "Excellent. And the humans?" Fleet Commander Vextar departed 3 cycles ago. He expects to reach their system within 20 rotations. We should have confirmation of their surrender shortly after. Emperor Zarkus nodded absently, already planning the next phase of expansion. The humans were an insignificant detail in the Empire's grand design. Their fate was sealed the moment Valdaran scouts identified their world. It was simply the natural order. The strong consumed the weak, and the Valdaran Empire was the strongest force in the galaxy. In the depths of space, Fleet Commander Vextar reviewed his attack plans aboard the battleship Dominion. 60 ships formed up behind him in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. The human single system lay just days ahead, unaware of the doom approaching them. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from the human homeworld. They appear to be entertainment broadcasts and data exchanges. Nothing suggesting military preparation." Vextar's forearms gestured dismissively. "As expected. They have no idea we're coming. Maintain stealth protocols until we're in position. I want this conquest to be swift and decisive." The Valdaran fleet continued its approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Behind them, the Empire celebrated another victory on Nexara 7, while ahead, Earth continued its seemingly peaceful existence. Neither side knew that this encounter would shatter assumptions held for centuries and reshape the very balance of power in the galaxy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo across the stars, challenging everything the Valdaran Empire believed about strength, strategy, and the true nature of humanity. In the quiet darkness between worlds, destiny waited to unfold its terrible truth. The surrender of Commander Vextar's fleet sent shockwaves throughout the Valdaran Empire, faster than any weapon could have traveled. Emperor Zarkus stood in his throne room, staring at the transmission from Sol system with an expression of absolute disbelief. His most experienced fleet commander was requesting permission to surrender to a species that wasn't even supposed to have a real military. "This is impossible," he muttered, replaying the tactical data for the dozenth time. No single system species could construct such a fleet in secret. Admiral Korath approached the throne cautiously, his multiple eyes reflecting the same shock that gripped the entire Imperial command structure. "Your Majesty, perhaps we underestimated these humans. The evidence suggests they've been preparing for this encounter for decades." Decades? Emperor Zarkis turned his attention to his military advisor. "How could they have known about us decades ago? Our first scouts only reached their system 40 rotations ago. The data suggests they've been studying us much longer than we realized, Your Majesty. They know our tactics, our technology, even our communication protocols. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a carefully planned ambush." Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Admiral Chen coordinated the boarding and processing of the surrendered Valdaran fleet. Human boarding parties moved through the enemy ships with clinical efficiency, cataloging technology and interrogating prisoners. Every piece of information gathered would be invaluable for the next phase of humanity's plan. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez reported from her analysis station, "preliminary examination of Valdaran technology confirms our theoretical projections. Their weapons and defenses are approximately 40 years behind our current capabilities. They've been using the same basic designs for centuries." Chen nodded, studying the intelligence reports flowing in from the captured ships. "What about their fleet deployments? Do we have updated information on Imperial military positions?" "Better than that," General Torres replied with satisfaction. "We have complete strategic databases from their command vessel. Deployment schedules, patrol routes, fleet compositions, even the locations of their hidden shipyards. The Valdarans never expected anyone to capture their strategic data intact." Dr. Vasquez pulled up a holographic display showing the Valdaran Empire's military structure. "Admiral, their entire defense strategy is based on the assumption that they'll always have technological and numerical superiority. They have no contingency plans for facing an equal or superior opponent." Chen studied the data with growing excitement. The Empire's military was a glass cannon, devastating against weaker opponents but vulnerable to anyone who could match their capabilities. "What about their home systems? Industrial capacity population centers? Heavily defended by their standards, but those defenses assume attackers will use Valdaran-level technology," Torres replied. "Our analysis suggests that a human fleet could penetrate their core systems with minimal casualties." The implications were staggering. Humanity had prepared to defend against the Valdaran Empire, but the intelligence they were gathering suggested something far more ambitious was possible. They could take the fight directly to the enemy's heart. "Admiral," Commander Liu Wei interrupted. "Incoming priority transmission from the captured Valdaran commander. He's requesting a private audience." Chen considered the request carefully. Information from a high-ranking enemy officer could be invaluable, but it might also be a trap. "Transfer him to secure holding on Luna Base. I'll speak with him under full security protocols." An hour later, Chen stood before Commander Vexistar in a sterile interrogation chamber deep beneath Luna's surface. The Valdaran officer looked haggard, his forearms restrained by human energy bonds that had proven impossible for Imperial technology to break. "Admiral Chen," Vextar began carefully, "I requested this meeting to warn you about what you're facing. My fleet was just a scouting force. When the Empire realizes what happened here, they'll send everything they have against your system." "How much is everything?" Chen asked calmly. 12,000 ships, Vextar replied. "The entire Imperial Navy, including the Emperor's personal fleet and the home system defense forces. They'll strip defenses from conquered worlds to assemble an armada that will turn your solar system into cosmic dust." Chen absorbed this information without showing any emotion. 12,000 ships was indeed a massive force, but humanity had been preparing for exactly this scenario. "When will this armada arrive?" 6 months, perhaps 7. They'll need time to organize such a massive deployment. Vextar leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. "Admiral, your technology is impressive, but numbers still matter. 12,000 ships, even primitive ones, can overwhelm any defense. Can they?" Chen asked quietly. "Commander, you've seen only the smallest fraction of human capabilities. Your fleet encountered our patrol vessels, ships we consider suitable for training exercises." Vextar's expression changed as the implications of her words sank in. "Training exercises? The vessels that destroyed your ships represent 40-year-old technology, Chen continued. Our current military assets are considerably more advanced. And as for numbers, she activated a holographic display showing the true scope of humanity's hidden fleet. Vextar stared at the display in growing horror. The 8,000 ships he had encountered were indeed just the tip of an enormous iceberg. Deep space shipyards throughout the solar system had been producing vessels for 4 decades. Hidden bases contained massive fleets, and construction facilities continued building new ships at an accelerating pace. 25,000 active warships, Chen announced. Another 15,000 in final construction phases. And Admiral, that's just the Sol system fleet. We've been expanding beyond this system for 20 years. Impossible, Vextar whispered. You're a single system species. Our intelligence confirmed this, Chen smiled coldly. Your intelligence confirmed what we wanted you to see. While your empire was conquering primitives, humanity was establishing hidden colonies in uninhabited systems. Secret shipyards, research facilities, and military bases spread across dozens of star systems. We've been preparing not just to defend ourselves, but to ensure this galaxy never suffers under imperial tyranny again. The display shifted to show human settlements and military installations spreading throughout local space. Each system contained fleets and defenses that dwarfed anything the Valdaran Empire could deploy. Humanity hadn't been hiding in fear. They had been building an interstellar civilization in absolute secrecy. Your empire believes it controls this region of space, Chen continued. In reality, you've been surrounded by human territory for 15 years. Every move your fleets have made, every conquest they've achieved has been observed and catalogued by our intelligence networks. Vextar's mind reeled as he processed the magnitude of the deception. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They had built a shadow empire that encompassed Valdaran space without anyone realizing it existed. But why? He asked desperately. Why reveal yourselves now? Why not continue hiding? Because hiding was never the plan, Chen replied. It was preparation. 40 years ago, humanity discovered the Valdaran Empire and made a decision. We could flee to distant galaxies, hide in the cosmic wilderness and hope you never found us. Or we could ensure that no other species would ever suffer under imperial conquest. She gestured to another display showing the fates of conquered civilizations, worlds stripped of resources, populations enslaved or exterminated, entire cultures erased from existence. We chose to end your empire's reign of terror permanently. You're planning to invade our territory, Vextar realized. This was never about defense. This was always about justice, Chen corrected. Your emperor sent a fleet to conquer and enslave humanity. Instead, he's given us the perfect justification to liberate every world under Valdaran control. When his armada arrives in 6 months, they'll find the Sol system empty except for automated defenses. Our real fleet will be busy liberating your conquered territories. Vexitar understood now why the humans had seemed so calm about facing impossible odds. They hadn't been cornered prey fighting for survival. They had been apex predators revealing themselves to begin the hunt. The galaxy will know that the age of Valdaran dominance is over, Chen announced, and it ends not with negotiation or gradual decline, but with the complete liberation of every enslaved world in imperial space. The war wasn't about to begin. It had already been won 40 years ago when humanity first made their choice. The Empire just didn't know it yet. 6 months after the encounter in Sol system, Emperor Zarkus III stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion, watching as the largest armada in Valdaran history dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human home system. 12,000 ships spread across space in formations that had conquered half the galaxy. Their combined firepower sufficient to crack planets and boil away entire atmospheres. "Sensor report," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying the absolute confidence of a ruler who had never known defeat. "Minimal defensive presence detected, Your Majesty," the sensor operator replied with obvious confusion. "We're reading only automated defense platforms and unmanned installations." "No sign of the massive fleet," Commander Vextar reported. Emperor Zarkus studied the tactical display with growing satisfaction. The humans had clearly realized the futility of opposing the Empire's full might, and abandoned their system rather than face annihilation. It was a wise decision that would allow him to claim victory while demonstrating imperial power to the galaxy. "Excellent," he declared. "The humans have acknowledged our superiority, and fled rather than face the consequences of their aggression. Signal the fleet to begin orbital bombardment of their installations. We'll turn the system into an example of what happens to species that dare threaten the Empire. The massive Valdaran fleet moved into bombardment formation, preparing to reduce humanity's birth world to cosmic debris. Particle cannons charged with devastating energy, while kinetic bombardment systems locked onto Earth's major cities. It would be a demonstration of power that would echo across the galaxy for centuries. That was when the trap was sprung. Reality seemed to tear apart as massive rifts opened throughout the Sol system. From these dimensional gateways emerged ships unlike anything the Valdaran Empire had ever encountered. Sleek vessels wreathed in energy fields that bent space itself, their hulls incorporating technologies that seemed to violate known physics. "What are those?" Emperor Zarkus demanded, staring at formations of ships that dwarfed his armada in both size and apparent power. "Unknown vessel configurations, Your Majesty," the sensor operator replied with growing panic. "Energy signatures are beyond our measurement capabilities. These aren't the ships Commander Vextar described." Admiral Chen's voice echoed across every Valdaran ship simultaneously, transmitted through communication systems that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Imperial encryption. "Emperor Zarkus III of the Valdaran Empire. Welcome to Sol System. You're just in time to witness the end of your reign." The Emperor's eyes widened as he realized the scope of the deception. The humans hadn't fled. They had been waiting with forces that made their previous fleet seem primitive by comparison. Impossible. No species could advance their technology so rapidly. "We didn't advance it," Chen replied calmly. "We simply stopped hiding it. What you encountered 6 months ago was our museum fleet, historical vessels maintained for training purposes. These are our current generation warships." The new human fleet demonstrated capabilities that redefined the possible. Ships phase-shifted through Valdaran formations, their weapons striking from dimensions the Empire didn't know existed. Energy beams that could adjust their properties in real time, cut through Imperial shields like they were made of paper. Gravitational weapons created localized space distortions that crushed entire squadrons into singularities. "Your Majesty," Admiral Korath called out from his position near the Emperor's throne. "We're receiving reports from throughout the Empire. Human fleets are simultaneously attacking every major Imperial system. They're everywhere at once." Emperor Zarkus stared at the tactical displays as the true scope of humanity's plan became clear. While he had been gathering his armada for this final assault, human forces had been positioning themselves throughout Valdaran space. Liberated worlds were already declaring independence, their populations rising against Imperial garrisons with human support. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How could they coordinate attacks across such vast distances?" "Because we've been in your territory for 20 years, Chen replied, her image appearing on his personal display. "Every conquered world, every slave colony, every mining operation. We've been there watching, preparing, waiting for this moment." The Battle of Sol lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the Valdaran Empire's entire military force had been either destroyed or captured. Not a single human vessel had been lost, and most hadn't even sustained damage. The technological gap had proven so vast that the battle was less a conflict than a demonstration. Emperor Zarkus found himself in a human detention facility, watching through secured transmission feeds as his empire collapsed around him. World after world declared independence as human liberation fleets provided protection against Imperial retaliation. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found themselves free. Their oppressors either fled or captured. "Why?" he asked Admiral Chen during his final interrogation. "Why go to such lengths? You could have simply fled to distant space and lived in peace." Chen studied the defeated emperor with cold eyes. "Because peace built on the suffering of others isn't peace at all. Your empire turned this galaxy into a charnel house, Emperor. 8 centuries of conquest, slavery, and genocide. Someone had to end it. And you appointed yourselves as judges of the galaxy?" "We appointed ourselves as liberators of the galaxy," Chen corrected. "Every world we've freed has been given the choice of independence or voluntary association with the new Galactic Federation. No forced allegiance, no mandatory tribute, no slavery. Just freedom to choose their own destiny." The Emperor looked around his cell, reality finally settling in. "What happens to my people? Will you exterminate us as we did to others?" "The Valdaran species will be relocated to their original homeworlds," Chen replied. "You'll be allowed to rebuild your civilization under Federation oversight, with the understanding that any attempt to resume Imperial expansion will be permanently ended. Your military will be disbanded, your weapons of mass destruction destroyed, and your government restructured to prevent future tyranny. Through the cell's window, Zarkus could see human ships departing for distant star systems, carrying aid and reconstruction materials to worlds that had suffered under Imperial rule. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity was using their overwhelming power to heal rather than conquer. "You could rule the galaxy," he observed quietly. "Your technology, your fleets, your organizational capabilities, you could build an empire that would make mine look primitive." "We could," Chen agreed. "But that's not who we are. Humanity learned long ago that true strength comes from lifting others up, not crushing them down. The galaxy doesn't need another empire, Emperor. It needs the chance to heal." In the months that followed, the transformation was remarkable. Freed worlds began forming voluntary associations, sharing technology and resources without coercion. Trade routes reopened as species that had been enemies under Imperial rule discovered common ground. The human fleets patrolled space not as conquerors but as peacekeepers, ensuring that no new tyrants could fill the power vacuum left by the Empire's collapse. Dr. Vasquez established the Galactic Rehabilitation Institute, helping former Imperial slaves recover their lost cultures and technologies. General Torres oversaw the peaceful integration of former Valdaran military personnel into reconstruction efforts. Commander Liu Wei led exploration missions to discover species the Empire had overlooked, bringing them peacefully into the growing galactic community. And Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching as former enemy species worked together to build something the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Valdaran Empire had stood for 8 centuries, bringing only death and suffering in its wake. Its fall had taken humanity 40 years to plan and less than a year to execute. But building something better would take generations. Humanity was ready for that challenge. After all, they had always been the species that turned impossible odds into inevitable victory. The galaxy would learn that some things were worth fighting for, and freedom was the greatest prize of all. The age of empire was over. The age of liberation had begun,